And this is how I consumed the game, because I was out at the Pride festivities on Saturday. And so I was keeping the game in my peripherals and just casually following along. And suddenly my timeline is all about this big non-basketball play by Chennedy Carter. And the way that the language came across my timeline was that it was a cheap shot, that it was a dirty play, that it was the worst play we've seen all season, that it was just horrific and needs to be talked about and needs to be regulated. And it wasn't called a flagrant one, which, let's be perfectly clear, it should have been called a flagrant one in the first place, and maybe it would have prevented some of the conversation from popping off. But by the time that I actually saw the video, by the time that I actually saw the Chennedy Carter hip check, blind hip check on Caitlin Clark, my honest reaction was, that's it? And then you see the context of it going into the hip check, where they were getting into it previously in the game. You see this box out right here, Caitlin Clark just kind of hanging out in the right corner. She and Chennedy Carter were yapping back and forth far before you get to the play heard around the WNBA. And shout out to Leah Boston, who was one of the big reasons why the Fever were able to get their second win of the season against this guy ultimately. But it's the hip check and the slow-mo of it that everybody talks about. And you see Chennedy Carter coming through with some choice words for Caitlin Clark before she gets to her. And by the time I actually saw this, CJ, I couldn't believe that this was the play that was getting everybody up in arms. Now, listen, there's a lot of layers to this, and the understanding, first and foremost, where's Caitlin Clark's teammates? Because at this point, Caitlin Clark is blind in that situation. And again, it's not a basketball play. Period. The end. Point blank. Not a basketball play. It's a dirty, cheap shot by Chennedy Carter, and it should have been called a flagrant one in the first place. The officials messed up, and they changed it the day after. Retroactively, it's called a flagrant one. But basketball, both men's and women's, is full of non-basketball plays that we talk about all the time. And I think we've gotten so lost in the sauce on microscoping or putting every single foul on Caitlin Clark under a microscope, because we have seen the Fever so many more times than we've seen other teams this season. And something like that pops off, and it continues to perpetuate what I believe to be a false narrative of, oh, everyone is out to get Caitlin Clark. For me, it's just basketball. She's a rookie. She's a star. She might not be the best player to ever come into the league, but she sure as hell has brought a surplus of attention and growth into the WNBA, so there is going to be more of a spotlight on her. But it's just basketball. It's a physical game. It's chippy, it's petty, and the W isn't immune to that just because it's women playing basketball. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah, I watched it live. I watched a handful of WNBA games this weekend, and my wife, just before we get into Caitlin Clark, because that seems to be the way we're doing these conversations, right? We want to talk about the WNBA, but we have to talk about it from the Caitlin Clark perspective because her star is so bright, and that's what grabs everybody's attention. And then we can talk about some of the other stuff that happened. But I was watching the Wing and the Lynx game. I was like, oh, my Dallas Wing are playing.
The kick to the head?
Wing. Tuned in just in time to see Courtney Williams inadvertently, maybe potentially inadvertently. I don't know how you inadvertently kick somebody in the head in
Body's
basketball.
Flow. Sometimes your leg just flails, you know?
Well, she kicked somebody in the head, and so we're continuing to watch that game. My wife turns to me and says, hey, this game is different than the game we watched the other day. I was like, oh, the Fever and the Sky. She's like, yeah. This is good basketball. I was like, oh, yeah. So let's be clear about this. What happened Saturday, Sky Fever, was not good basketball. That's two young teams trying to figure themselves out, trying to find a way to get a win somewhere. The Fever are now 2-8, I think, and the Sky are like 3-6 or something like that. Like that's not really good basketball. We're only watching that game, and we only care about that game because we care about this perceived rivalry between two stars off the court and growing into themselves on the court and the professional level. Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark. With that being said, I saw the hip check live, and I said, oh, that's dirty. She's got to be out of here. Like, that's not a play that we can allow in this sport unless, and I'm a fan of this, we let these people fight it out. Which brings me to my next point, and I brought this up, and I feel like I continuously bring this up, and I don't do this often. I'm like, I was the first one with this take because it doesn't really matter. But I was the first one to say, yo, what the hell are her teammates doing?
Yes.
At a certain point, you've got to step in.
Yes.
Either Caitlin Clark got to shut the hell up and hoop. And you sent the video clip earlier and we played it of Caitlin Clark drawing after getting that tip and Aaliyah Boston getting the bucket, drawing with her. With,
Yes.
why am I blanking on her name?
Chennedy Carter.
Chennedy Carter.
Yes.
Right? Don't do that. You don't want to
And
get
also,
hip checked, shut the hell up. But if you
Caitlin
do
jaws
get
constantly. That's who, like Caitlin
well, then
Clark did not ask to be a victim.
Stop talking.
Or
if you don't want,
and you keep.
or do.
It's not like Caitlin Clark got up there.
Or do and stand up and slap her. Right? Like that's your two options. Your two options at this point in time. Shut the hell up and ball, or keep talking and fight somebody.
Right.
Like, and I'm fine with the latter, not the former. Don't stop talking. Talking is a part of it. Fight. It's time to stand. And
it's time
the
to have
conference,
your 2008 spark shock moment where in Candace Parker's rookie season,
you have to.
You're in the midst where you finally snapped and you get in a fight because you fight back. And like 10 players ended up suspended from that. I was going back and reading the oral history of that fight between those two teams. Did you know that's the reason why Nancy Lieberman got signed to a team at the age of 50? Because they needed another player. Because they lost all of their players from that fight because everybody got into it. Like people who are looking at the WNBA right now and thinking that this is some what has happened to the game I love. Stop. The game you love, you haven't watched it.
The WNBA is in a really cool spot from this perspective. Where the NBA, I think, a fair amount of fans will say, I don't want to say most, but I do hear this complaint a lot, feel like the NBA has gone a touch too far on the soft side.
Sure.
Right? It's like, okay, we don't need you to be bludgeoning people. We don't need you to go Kenyon Martin, Karl Malone style, yanking dudes out of the sky, although that was a great moment.
Yeah.
But we do want some sort of physicality. And the WNBA exists in a place now where, honestly, it is to me, a much more physical game than the NBA. They are actually like screens. People are colliding. Not just Caitlin Clark getting screened, but like Courtney Williams. We talked about that.
We just
Everybody
saw Angel
screened,
Reese get clotheslined by Alyssa Thomas. And granted, in that case,
chokeslam.
Alyssa Thomas got tossed. And so that kind of settled it in that moment.
But again,
still.
And we see those types of plays happening way more in the WNBA than we do in the NBA, right? So the WNBA has got to decide, yo, this is our Jordan right here. And are we going to step in and soften this up, or are we going to allow it to continue? They've got to figure that out on their end from a commissioner and a rules committee standpoint. And whatever they do will dictate how this game gets played going forward. But for now, this is kind of what it is. It is what it is at this point. You can't keep getting clobbered like Caitlin Clark is getting clobbered and not react. And it's unfair to expect her not to react. And again, if she can't react, somebody on that team has to. The press conference with the coach really bothered me also because she's sitting up there. She's like, "Yo, listen, I don't know what to say. I don't want to get fined." No.
And then she tweeted the next day.
You have to
say
go
it with
get
your
fined.
chest.
Go get
not
fined.
Not with the keyboard.
Go get fined. Get fined. Get the tech in the moment. The Lynx coach, Courtney Williams,
threw the clipboard.
Kicked the chick in the face. That's not a basketball play. Anytime you kick somebody in the face in basketball, that's got to be a flagrant one. At least caught the flagrant. What did she do? She threw the clipboard. We so hard that we heard the smack, right? And then she got the tech. They need to do that with Caitlin. Otherwise, why the hell would I stop clobbering her? Because that's the scouting report. The scouting report is she doesn't like contact.
Player physical.
And it's not a whole lot of players who like contact. She's not the only one. She doesn't like contact. Get physical with her and keep that in the back of her mind and let her know that you will bump and battle and bruise her if necessary, if need be. And so if that's in the scouting report, she's got to get a little bit tougher and be able to take those bumps and bruises. And again, somebody has got to come over there. And if you're not going to throw hands, fine, I get it. But how many times in the NBA and then in the NFL and in some of these other sports do we see dudes just run up and start jabber-jawing? Baseball, they run all the way from the damn bullpen into the infield just to yell at one another. Like, do something like that.
Hockey, they do helmet to helmet, waiting.
Chest to chest, nose to nose. Just yell at these chicks to get them to stop hitting Caitlin Clark like that. Or Caitlin Clark, shut the hell up and ball. Like, those are your options at this point.
The Jessica Benson Show with CJ Hurt, live every weekday at 8 a.m.